you'll hear a common theme right now, and that is that many of these figures like to pretend they are essentially experts on all things scientific. Let me give you another example here. This is where we get to the Pope. Go to WM Review, which we'll be using a bit for this piece here. Leo XIV invokes tikkun olam, a concept of our so-called elder brothers, Kabbalah. Let's break down what his cringeworthy reference to tikkun olam does and does not mean. Now, this was shared. I'll have a link to the full video of him saying this if you want on X. If you want to see it, it's almost 6 minutes long. That's why I'm not going to play for you the full thing. I did trim down to about a 3-minute video, which I'll show you in a second. What I cut out of it was mostly him talking about the wonders of the people working on ALS. That's fine. The context here is that he gave an address to the ALS Foundation, and they were going to be doing or the ALS Association. They were going to do a big walk for finding solutions to the problems they work with. Generally speaking, kind of a weird thing for a pope to do, but the weirdest part about it is just how much of that address was given to talking about the doctors and their research and all this stuff, which doesn't play well on a platform like this, but I'll have a link to the full thing if you want to see it. But here is what he had to say in a trimmed down version, because it's also not just tikkun olam he invokes.
Peace be with you all. Greetings from Rome. I'm very happy to join you in Chicago as the Les Turner ALS Foundation gathers us for the annual ALS Walk for Life. Ours is a gathering of many people. Let me say first of all that I'm filled with admiration and gratefulness to the researchers and scientists gathered here. Our Jewish brothers and sisters tell us that one of the great projects given the human family by God is to complete and perfect the very good creation given us, tikkun olam. My predecessor, Pope John Paul II, wrote, "If an artist cannot be stopped from using his creativity, neither should those who possess particular gifts for the advancement of science and technology be prevented from using their God-given talents for the service of others." Your care and compassion for those living with ALS and other motor neuron diseases are an inspiration to me and to all people. As our friends share in the Hadith, we are told that 70,000 angels are present when caretakers arrive in the morning. 70,000 other angels arrive in the evening. I believe that you too are angels. With devotion, knowledge, and skill, you care for our sisters and brothers with ALS, family, friends, and people who were once strangers. And in fact, your love has been purified by your service and then by your mourning. You have learned and are every day entering more deeply into the most profound of mysteries. Death is not the final word.
You heard enough, right? As one person in the comments talked about it, why aren't you talking about the salvation of souls? Humanism is an affront to God. Now, you can take this issue a few ways, the tikkun olam thing, a few ways. And some will go to what critics of the traditional movement would call the fringe aspect of things, involving, secretive plans by our so-called elder brothers. I'm not going to go there, mostly because that, I think, gives those groups way too much credit. But I'm going to go here to WM Review. I'm going to talk about the more concrete problem with this. Say, let's break down his cringeworthy references to that and what it does and does not mean. So here's what he has to say. When speaking to participants in Chicago's ALS Walk for Life, Leo XIV offered a warm greeting and words of gratitude for scientists, caregivers, and patients. But in the midst of his remarks, he made an extraordinary aside. Our elder brothers and sisters tell us of one of the great projects given to the human family by God is to complete and perfect the very good creation given us, tikkun olam. Tikkun olam is broadly described as, quote, any activity that improves the world, bringing it closer to the harmonious state for which it was created. And there's a footnote there, and if you would like to know what that is, the footnote, if you go down to the end, well, it was there at the end. I don't know what happened to it. This happens sometimes. It refers to repairing, perhaps more properly improving the world through human activity. However, while it would probably be a mistake to treat Leo's passing reference of it too seriously, the term has darker and more troubling meanings than it may appear, which makes his invocation both scandalous and embarrassing. In recent decades, it has been bandied about in circles of our elder brothers, as well as outside of them, as a slogan for naturalistic social activism. Both Barack Obama and Bill Clinton have used the term as a means of establishing common good with American Jewish voters. The term is associated with spreading quote unquote values such as this right to sacrifice to Moloch, the women's ideology, the James Martin ideology, and green politics. Writing in the JNS, Dr. Sheila Nazarian explained that, quote, the term has skyrocketed in popularity today, particularly among the American Jewish left. In fact, it is so commonly used in liberal circles that it has become something of a punchline. Activists minded of these liberals treat it as a synonym for social justice, referring to acts of civic responsibility meant to repair the political and social ills of the world. This idea has come to refer to things like allyship, supporting marginalized communities, championing diverse voices, or simply just adopting progressive politics, all in the name of some alleged ancient commitment of our so-called elder brothers to fighting injustice and uplifting the oppressed. Some of them even interpret it as simply voting for the Democratic Party, end quote. Now, you may, if you're new and you're wondering why I call them our so-called elder brothers in the faith, it's because they hate that term. They hate it. And so out of respect to them on a basic dignity level, I will honor their opinion of that by saying so-called. At the same time, being critical of that group gets you pretty much nuked on this platform. But yeah, that's what that term has come to mean, voting for Democrats. Thanks, Pope. Given his political commitments, it would seem probable that Leo XIV understands the term either in this sense, or at least in a broader sense of good deeds having some power to repair the world. However, this represents the secularization of a term which originally had a religious meaning, which it continues to have for practicing members of that faith. We seem to be entering dark, dark times. Many have fallen silent under the previous, well, he calls it regime, and other worrying sides have appeared since his election. And I think all of that is accurate. So I'm not too worried necessarily if you go into the deeper sort of connotations. I am much more, in the grand scheme of things, worried about people who wear a religion as a mask for their political activism. I think those people do whatever faith they follow, do a grave disservice to just the very concept of religion itself. And they are able to dupe good, well-meaning people through the language they employ. But that is the weird statement from the Pope. And you would think that this would get some pushback. It's gotten hardly any coverage at all. But that's kind of a running theme these days. You may have noticed that not a lot of us anymore are talking about weird things happening in Rome. I guarantee you, if Pope Francis had given that same speech verbatim, you'd have 50 videos on it right now on this platform. Blog posts, Substack posts would be covering this. Major traditional aligned Catholic news outlets would be publishing articles on this, wondering, well, what is this? Invoking secular social justice terminology to create a better world, to repair a broken world. If you want to repair a broken world, because none of us disagrees, I don't think that the world is broken. This is a sin-steeped world, broken from grace. And the way to repair it is to repair the bond of society to God, and that would be through the widespread spread of the gospel, bringing souls to Christ. You bring enough people to Christ, and you're going to transform the culture, transform society. It really is as simple and as complicated as that, because on paper, it sounds pretty simple to spread the gospel. But as we know, that is a much more complicated prospect than it sounds on paper. It requires a lot of people wearing their faith on their sleeve and willing to talk to total strangers about it. Like, for instance, one of the reasons Catholics are celebrating Charlie Kirk in the aftermath of what happened to him is because he wore his faith on his sleeve. And I do wish more Catholics did too. That they'd be willing to talk to people who disagree with us as peacefully as we can, if the other side is willing to be peaceful in the discussion, and just naturally invoke faith the way he did. That's why it was so heartening to see Bishop Barron at his memorial. That's why it was, good to see some of the kind of borderline cardinals and bishops in the United States at the funeral, and why it was so fascinating to see 100 million people worldwide tuned into it. There is a hunger out there for the actual gospel. And invoking this secularist, materialist language doesn't scratch the itch. The only thing that scratches that itch is the gospel. And unfortunately, we, on paper anyway, non-Catholic public figures seem to be doing a better job of it than high-profile Catholic prelates. You have to ask yourself why that is. Thank you for the super chat, Brian Rory. It is appreciated. He says, Prevost is wearing the costume of a pope, whitewashed tomb filled with dead men's bones. You shall know them by their fruit. Well, the fruit so far hasn't been too good yet. Again, some people will continue to wait and see. I'm past that at this point, but I fully expect he'll do some things that will be, at least appear to be pretty good. But the track record so far hasn't been promising either, because his episcopal appointments speak for themselves, and most of them have been pretty bad. Now, I'm curious what people think of all of this. Elaine says, he has had time for this, but no time for the restoration of the traditional Mass. People are suffering due to the restrictions of this Holy Mass. Yes. That's true. He himself admitted he hadn't spent any time on the traditional Mass issue, which rather strongly implies that he and Cardinal Burke didn't speak about it, or that he just didn't remember the conversation he had with Cardinal Burke just 3 weeks ago, or whatever it was. Either is troubling. Maywood says, Jesus commissioned the apostles saying, go and preach to all nations. Yes. Baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Yes. The Elio effect is like not picking on the weak-looking kid on the playground. So let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments. Please, I'm not trying to whip you up against Pope Leo or even some of the bishops we talked about. Pray for them. Salvation of souls is the first law of the church, including theirs and including ours. We may very well be judged on how we react and respond to this crisis in the church. So please pray for their salvation. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.